wish to add margins to your Re-Teak panel, I'm going to show you how you can do that. You take your sheet that you've previously welded or caulked together. So there's a sheet. The template is underneath, as you can see, cut to the right size. What we need to do now is to centre the panel onto the template. Now, the centre line here we can place right in the middle, but what you can do to check the squareness is to check from the black line, the edge of the caulk line, to the perimeter of your template. Here we have a 7 centimetres. Again there, that's 7 centimetres. And checking on the other side just to make sure everything's right, 7 centimetres. So we know that the centre line is running right through there. It's running through the centre of that particular plank. That enabled us to add the 50mm margin all the way around the outside without creating a nasty double line. The margins are made from the same material as the main body of the panel. What we need to do is to cut your margins slightly oversize to allow for a bit of wastage. So we need to do that on all 4 edges initially. Again, we can use the heat gun just to soften them and allow them to lay a little flatter. Take care to keep the heat away from your template, because if it's made of a plastic material such as this, any type of polythene, it will shrivel up and shrink with the application of heat. Just a little bit of heat and you can see that they're already flattening out quite nicely. The next stage is to cut both sides of the black line off to give you a plain teak section. And we can just lay that down. Take your straight edge and your sharp knife and remove the black portion. That's one side cleared, and do precisely the same on the other side. Now we have cut the black lines off both sides of the material, which started out like that. We've now cut the black lines off and we've got the margin section. Next thing to do is to position the margins on the main sheet, and that can be done either way. Basically, using your eye, align the outside edge here with the outside edge of your template, and you can push the straight edge up against it just to make sure that it fits nicely, and then using a pen or a pencil with a relatively fine point, you can draw a line down there, and again exactly the same. Now you've marked the position of the border on all 4 sides. The next thing to do is to use your joining strip, but you'll notice that there is a little gap here. So what you now have to do is deduct the width of this gap, which is 3mm, from the line you've drawn. So basically you have to bring everything in again another 3mm. Once you've drawn your lines all round the outside, you're going to use a little bit of the jointing strip, cut the edge off like that. You can use this as a gauge to work out just a tiny little bit smaller. You need to use it as a gauge for the 3mm thickness that you need to cut off. So it goes down the side, 3mm smaller than you've basically marked before. And you're using this little bit of the jointing strip as a gauge. And then draw a line. And proceed to do the same for all 4 edges. Once you've drawn your new line 3mm in from the outside all the way round, what you need to do now is to cut the panel to that line. So remove your template from underneath to avoid cutting it. Using a straight edge and the knife, carefully cut down the inside marked line. So say, not necessarily to cut it in one single go, little by little, and you'll find that the blade won't wander. If you are having trouble, what you can do is use your hot air gun, warm the material a little bit, and you'll find that the knife will cut through it much easier. And the waste here is just a small illustration of the strength of the welded panel. It is immensely strong. Once you've cut your sheet, lay it on top of your original template, and what you should find is that if you lay the borders on the outside, you will have something resembling a 3mm gap all the way round. It's just a little visual check before progressing any further to make sure you've got things at the right size. So now what we're going to do is attach the joining strip and the 2 sides of the panel. So cut a little piece of the joining strip, just a little oversize, you see, just a couple of mil bigger than the panel. And what we're going to do is use the cold weld adhesive to stick the jointing strip between that and this outside edge. So again, take your cold weld and apply it to the flat surface of the jointing strip. And then press your border up against it and hold it down nice and flat. The use of a bit of weight here may be helpful. Note, I've only glued one side at the moment. I'll cut the other side, exactly the same fashion. A couple of millimetres bigger than the actual panel requires. On that side I joint the outer strip first, on this particular one, just in way of a change, just to show that there's no hard and fast rule. I'll join the inner one. Just lift it up, slide it underneath, and push it up against the edge of the panel. Just like that. And what we'll do, apply adhesive to the other side of the jointing strip and join on, stick on the outside border. Just press it together. Again, a little bit of weight will be helpful at this stage. And just allow that to dry for about 10 minutes. Go and have a cup of tea or something. Once you've attached the two edges, take the knife and then just cut the excess off. Like that, and remove. And repeat for all 4 edges, so that they're all nice and neat like that. Once you've done that, it's simply a case of adding a little bit more. This time, try and cut it precisely the right size, or maybe even a fraction smaller than the length. And again, using the cold weld, apply the edge strip underneath. Once we've introduced and stuck on the jointing section on both sides, we can now add the margin on the side. Basically, just lay it on, offer it up like this, and we're going to work on this first corner. Basically, it's going to be a mitre, and how we create that is by going corner to corner. So where the two edges meet there, and where the two edges meet on the outer side, use your straight edge, align them. What you need to do is just draw a line there. So that's your first line, and if you use your cutters, or alternatively you can use a straight edge and a knife, just cut right down that line. So we can reintroduce it, and you find that if you go corner to corner, you've got a perfect mitre there. So again, you can replicate, using this as a straight edge, replicate the line across there. Now what you need to do is to pick up your piece of jointing section again, and where you have that line, put it right in the centre. So what you are doing is offsetting this by about 1.5 mil. Very small amount, because this has got to be introduced between both margins, just as you have here. So once you've got that position, you can draw the line, and this time using the Stanley knife, carefully cut off. Try not to go through your template underneath, because you're still using it as a pattern and you don't want to shred it completely. So, combination of various tools here to cut your mitre. Now if you offer this one up and just slip this in as a spacer, you can see the general principle. You've now got a mitre there, and you basically do the same thing to all 4 corners, adding your jointing section in, and each time as you go round. Add a piece of adhesive on one side only, and add it to this side here that you've already stuck down. Now what you can use acts as a spacer, so you can work on the opposite corner just as you did before. Straight edge going corner to corner. Use your pen, mark the line, and then again putting the jointing section right in the middle, you can mark off 1.5 mil. place your ruler across the two marks, mark it off, and with a knife and a straight edge, neatly cut through to form your first part of a mitre. Put a bit of a weight there, and this time sliding the whole of the spacer section underneath, and this time sliding the whole of the spacer underneath. It will enable you to gauge or mark the position to cut through. Repeat what we did on the other corner. And so now, when you drop this in, it should fit perfectly between the two edges. Just to ensure it does, apply some more cold weld all the way along the bottom strip. And you can now add the margin. Put a little bit of weight on it, just for a couple of minutes to allow it to set, and then repeat on the other side. Once you've stuck all the perimeter on, your panel will look somewhat like this. What we now need to do is just to trim the edges off with the angle shears so it looks like that. Now we have the panel all cut and bordered. It only remains for us to weld the edge margin. So you take, in this case, a 5mm weld rod for the margin. Unlike the field where we used a 3mm one, we've got to use a 5mm one for the edges. Now that's very important. So again, just as before, you measure it out just a couple of centimetres bigger than what you require, and again the weld rod will stretch. And what we're going to do is weld the corner down the straight and off the corner again. So we'll turn the welder on and allow it a couple of minutes for it to warm up. Now we're going to weld the margin onto the field. We've already glued it on using the jointer, the jointing strip. Now we're going to use the hot air welder and the 5mm welding strip that I've just dropped. The 5mm welding strip to complete the operation. So again, you can put the welding rod through the machine just a couple of times to soften it up so it's a little more malleable. Then we start welding. Once you've welded the first section on, get your spatula cutter or your sharp chisel, whichever you're using, and carefully cut the top of the weld off, just as you did before. And there you have the welded joint. We'll repeat on the other side, just the same. Now we've welded the two sides, we've got to complete the section by welding these pieces. And what we need to do is across both ends, got a double layer of masking tape. This acts as a heat shield, as we'll actually start physically welding on the masking tape and then go down the line. This ensures that the weld starts straight away. Run it through the welder. As I say, commence your weld actually on the masking tape. So push it through, start on the masking tape, gentle pressure, and again right off onto the masking tape. When you've done that, just remove the tape, take your knife, right down. So you can see there's your weld. Requires a tiny little bit of sanding in those corners. So we do exactly the same on the other side. Once you've completed all four corners, you can cut them off nicely with your chisel. If necessary, tiny bit of sandpaper to sand right in the perimeter corner here, right at the edges, so the joints then become invisible. If you do the same on all four corners, you then have a completed, margined, fully welded Re-Teak panel. So here in that section of videos, I've shown you just how easy it is to construct your own Re-Teak panel, either fully welded or by hand caulking. On this video demonstration, I have just shown you how to make simple rectangular panels, but obviously the Re-Teak product is not restricted to this. You can make panels of any shape or size. We have a wider 125mm product that will allow you to cut unusual shapes, curves, compound curves, etc. So there's nothing to restrict you except your own ability or possibly courage.